right, here we are with another New Zealand Aviation podcast. It's been a while, but we've been busy. I've been doing a few things. And Martin, you're still, in Nuremberg, doing your thing?
Nuremberg.
Doing what people do in Nuremberg. Not what they used to do.
Well, no, certainly not. Yes.
Anyway, how's it going?
It is interesting, and the historical aspect of Nuremberg is particularly interesting when you go down to the the old Nazi convention grounds and everything. It's actually pretty thought-provoking.
Yeah, because the footage of that, which is readily available on YouTube, is mind-blowing. The scale of it's hard to imagine that, what it would have been like being there for one of those rallies, because about 1 million people, maybe even more, and all that pageantry, with the flags and the things being held up and the iron crosses and the eagles. My God.
Yeah, amazing, and it's really close to the center of town. And Nuremberg was very important to the Nazis, because although it was never the capital, it was seen as the sort of most German town. It was culturally seen to be a very important place in the Nazi mythology, and so they've got all these areas around town where they started building these massive, to last 1,000 years, their Congress Hall and their rally grounds and all this, and it's just it is pretty amazing.
Wow!
I mean, one of the lakes on the ground is actually the excavation they made for I think it was going to be a 400,000 seat stadium or something.
Man, even by that would be still the biggest stadium ever, wouldn't it?
Would have been the biggest ever, yeah. But they never finished it, and they never finished half these buildings because the war came. Yeah. But it's quite interesting. Nuremberg got spectacularly heavily bombed in 1944. And there's recordings of Joseph Goebbels saying, "Don't worry, we'll use our technology and our German will just to rebuild the city exactly the way it was." Blah blah blah, and the place was just smashed.
Yeah, they never. Most of them never got the message even right to the end, did they? The hardcore.
Oh, and they turned the rally grounds into a labor camp.
Right. Okay. Well,
not good.
And I think Goebbels arranged, that was his idea, wasn't it? Those big rallies, they were part of his propaganda strategy.
Incredibly well done.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, on all sorts of levels. Fascinating. All right, so plenty has happened. I'm going to talk about what we did in Brazil before the end of the program, but let's get right to it. I guess we've always got to start with the biggest story out there in aviation. It is the ongoing situation with Boeing, the 737 MAX. There's been a lot of stories around, all those pictures of parking lots and anywhere they can find space now being sort of taken up with 737 MAX models coming off the production line. They're pouring off, nowhere to go. I've been over to Moses Lake before. It's pretty sleepy sort of airfield. Boeing have used it a lot for their flight testing over the years, and I see that's chocker now with 737 MAXs, so they're coming off the line at Renton. They're flying them over the mountains to Moses Lake. And Martin, I see they're advertising for a whole bunch of engineers, avionics people on temporary contracts, because they're obviously getting ready to deliver those aircraft. I mean, this thing it's hard to know how big this is, but you just can tell from the images that this is big, and they surely must be close to thinking about production, and these major airlines are talking about not flying them till December. So where is it all at, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, a number of analysts have discussed the headache Boeing's going to have when they finally do get to go ahead, and they'll have something like 400 or 500 aircraft to prepare and hand over, on top of the 50 a month they're still producing.
Wow.
So it's going to be a logistical nightmare. And, these planes have got to be unpacked, unwrapped, because they'll have wrapped up the engines and all the sensors and everything. They have to install the new software, although I presume, I don't know, are they doing it now already before it's been given the go-ahead? If they're already doing it, it means that there's no other option. If this software doesn't pass, what are they going to do? I don't know, recertify perhaps. But, it's going to be a huge amount of work for Boeing. And there still will be significant delays, up to 9 months, some people are saying. That even if your plane's produced, you might be getting it 9 months later than you thought you were. On top of the delay, right?
Yeah.
So it's the delay plus 9 months.
I wonder how they update software on that scale. Is it like, you plug a sort of hard drive into every aircraft, or can they sort of network it as a mass download? I wonder how it works.
Yeah, no, I don't believe they are networked to that extent. And also, I don't know, and I really know nothing about this. I know a friend of mine's a technician he's worked on Embraer and A320, and he says that is central. You have a sort of an Airbus specified provided laptop. Software gets put onto the laptop. It all gets checked on the laptop. You take it into the plane. You use a special data cable. You plug it in. Off it goes, and it updates all the systems. That's what it does. And because it's a centralized fly-by-wire system, that is the case. I'm not sure to what extent the Boeing machines are completely integrated. I know the stuff I work on, you'd think it'd be integrated because it's all computer controlled and there are master computers and slave computers, but you still have to go by, if there's a major machine update, you still have to go and update every computer individually in order, which is kind of crazy. Makes no sense.
Okay, so they've. It says, I'm just reading one of the stories here. The manufacturer has developed a software fix for the jets, and regulators haven't said when they expect to clear the planes to fly again. Even after they sign off, airline executives have said it will take more than a month for the airlines to get the aircraft back in the air because they've got to make the software changes and train their pilots. So, yeah.
Oh, it's going to be more than months. And also, the FAA has formed this committee of the great and the good, 737 MAX operators to ease communication and aid transparency and get everyone happy so it all goes smoothly. And there are Chinese airlines on this board, and given the current trade wars, they might not have a lot of incentive to make this go quickly.
Well, I think there's something that we can talk about shortly that might illustrate that point. In the meantime, apart from the IAG order, which was a letter of intent for some 200, but I don't think it qualified as an order. It was about halfway to an order. That's the only thing they've had, right?
Yeah. In fact, sales for Boeing have been way down. I mean, they sold a couple of 787. I see some airline ordered, KLM ordered 2 777s this week. But it's been very quiet. And as you pointed out, that is actually going to affect airline orders from all manufacturers over the next year or so. What is it here? British Aerospace Lobby Group, ADS, is here in the news saying they recently slashed their forecast for 2019 global aircraft deliveries from 1,789 to 1,489. So that's quite a drop. And now, what's the status also with the new 777? There are engine issues, I think. Yes, the stators apparently need re-engineering. So I think GE produced 8 test engines and 4 of them being sent back to the factory for major surgery. Major to the point that it's delayed the first flight of the 777X until sometime next year. They're hoping for early 2020. The 777-8X, the ultra-long-range version, that has been officially postponed now. So it's been pushed back a year or 2 at least. And there's talk of it being cancelled because there's really not that many orders for it. So that's quite an interesting development. Also, there's still that story bubbling on that Emirates are going to change a lot of their 777Xs into 787s. Right. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Is that because their loads are thinning out? They're a major order as well. Are their loads starting to thin out a bit now, Emirates? I guess that can be the only explanation, right? They want to go for smaller planes with maybe a bit more frequency. They haven't talked about A380, though. They've got a huge load of A380s. There's been no talk at all about, because Air France, they're taking A380 out of the fleet, I think, in 2 or 3 years. I don't know what Lufthansa is doing, but there's been a bit of that. There's been no word at all about what Emirates intends to do with A380s. I guess they'll retire the older ones at about 10 years, which must be coming up pretty soon. Yeah, they'll have to start rolling them over, and then maybe they're getting ready for their new business model. I mean, maybe that's what they've decided to do. They said we got an opportunity to get some planes probably cheap. Boeing will probably give them a good deal. They can swap the 777X orders downsize them and get more 787s. And maybe they're saying, well, we have to live with the new reality. We don't have a giant plane anymore. The 777 is going to be our biggest, so we'll just fan out and use smaller planes more often.
All right. Okay. Now, getting on to China and announcement in the last week or so, China's three biggest state-owned airlines announced deals to purchase 35 ARJ21-700 regional jets from the state plane maker COMAC, the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China. And deliveries scheduled from 2020 to 2024. And the order is worth $1.33 billion to each of the carriers: Air China, China Southern Airlines, and China Eastern Airlines. For what I'm reading here, makes sense, based on list prices. But that really, I mean, is there such a thing as a list price for this aircraft? But what this smacks of, given the quantity, is China biting back against the US and Boeing, in this case probably, as part of the trade war. Do you reckon?
Yeah, and of course there is no list price, it being one government department providing other government departments, in this case the airlines, with a product, for whatever token amount they want to swap over electronically. But it is the thin end of the wedge, because while this plane might not be the best performing plane in the world, in fact it definitely isn't the best performing plane anywhere, it sends a very strong signal to Boeing. I mean, Boeing's the one that's going to lose here. And it's probably something that Boeing really doesn't want to happen, because this plane will get developed. The experience will be put forward to developing, or put into developing other aircraft. And within 10, 20 years, China might have a very competitive airline out on its books.
Well, there's the C919, isn't it, which looks like an Airbus type A320 type aircraft in that class, and that hasn't obtained airworthiness certification yet, not in service. But that's probably the next one that they will use as to fill that gap. Absolutely.
And the C919 it's not a warmed over MD-80. It looks like a modern aircraft.
Yeah.
So that's going to be the last thing, but because it's the last thing America wants, because a great deal of America's balance of payments are made up through Boeing.
Yeah,
billions and billions.
And you, I think, put forward the question, or you put out a watch this for this, and that was watch out for the Boeing bailout. It could be that the Boeing bailout could come under the guise of offsetting any losses that losing Chinese orders for their aircraft might cause, but really also putting them back in a situation where they can carry on after this huge problem with the 737 MAX. So your suggestion to keep an eye out for that could be, could be a very good one.
Yeah. So this C919, just to put it in perspective, it's got 305 firm orders. It's got 703 options. So it's a total of 1,008 commitments in one form or another.
Wow.
And if it's halfway decent, the Chinese will go large on it.
Yeah.
Pretty scary.
And it wouldn't have to be that halfway decent, because if it's serving a political purpose as well, then they'll factor that in. But yeah, okay. So this could be a real problem again for Boeing, losing. What proportion of their orders, especially for narrow bodies, came from China? They got hundreds, didn't they? Hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah. I'll actually have a quick look for that.
Okay. So, but the interesting point to make about this regional jet, the ARJ21-700, is it looks like a 717. Of course, I think McDonnell Douglas back in the 80s put assembly production facilities into China for, I think they sold them about 90 or so MD airliners. And you can see that the tooling and the reproduction of tooling and the look of this latest aircraft is pretty close to the look of those MDs.
Yeah. It's an exact copy. Just like the C919 might not be an exact copy, but it looks suspiciously like an A320.
And they had Airbus assembly in China as well. So this whole technology transfer and, for want of a better term, a theft of intellectual property, which is an issue that, the Americans are really hot about. So here's an example right in their face. It's brutal.
It is brutal, yeah. And I think the C919 does have it's certainly a more Western aircraft. I mean, the ARJ21 has very many Western components, but I think quite a few Western companies were involved in the development of the C919. I think they did a co-development with the fly-by-wire system and all the stuff.
Well, that could be a problem.
Plane, right?
That could be a problem if Trump's trying to pull companies out of America. That could be a problem. But then the Russian operator, or the Russian builder, Irkut, and the MC-21-300. I mean, that may get a look in China.
Yeah, it might do. It might do. I mean, it would probably make sense for that plane and the C919 to become part of a family, because you've basically got an A320 and an A321 with those two planes. But see what happens. You know, it's a time for strange things to happen, and they're happening quite quickly these days.
Well, the MC-21 order. Current firm order total is 175 aircraft, letters of intent for a further 160. I mean, that's not bad. It's not bad.
No, it's not bad. No, and it looks to be a fine aircraft. Of course, it'll come down to support and that type of thing, which is where support and reliability, which is traditionally where Russian airliners tend to fall down, not because their planes are any less reliable than other people's planes, but it's just they tend not to have the staff on the ground or the training organizations out there to make it happen. And of course, it's the chicken and the egg situation. You know, what do you put in place first? The support organization will try and sell the planes with the knowledge that you might have a bad support organization. So yeah, that's going to be hard to. But you know, needs must, and if they decide they really want to send a message, they'll put the money into it. Both of those countries will put the money into it. So.
That's what killed the Caravelle in United States in the early days. It had no competition, but they couldn't support it properly, and that affected them. Anyway. We'll see what happens there. Speaking of the 777 and Qantas, they want that long-range aircraft. They're going to do some trial flights shortly of well over 21 hours, I think, just to see if people can handle it. And you would have thought that 777 long-range aircraft was in the frame with a delay on the engines and them unlikely to make that. Could be that if they want to do that, it's really the A350. 900, 1,000 long-range version of either that's going to be in the reckoning.
It's at the moment that's all there is. Boeing have said definitely the long-range one is going to be pushed back. I think it's 2 years. Qantas has said they want to make a decision on their Project Sunrise, as they call it, by the end of this year. There is talk that Boeing has come back with an interim offer of some 777-200 LRs to bridge the gap, but that would appear to me to be quite risky for Qantas. So they're bridging for a plane that may or may not come, and in fact the plane will probably only come if Qantas order it. So there's not a huge amount of commonality. It has no commonality with the new 777 has no commonality with the previous one. The wings and everything are all different. The engines are different. Boeing are obviously signaling that they're not expecting a great deal of orders for the ultra long-range version. And the reason for that is because the big one also has enormous range. It doesn't have quite enough range to do what Qantas needs to do. Whereas the A350, it's the beginning of a new family rather than the end of an existing family, because the 777 probably won't be developed much more until it gets replaced. So with the A350, you've got basically a brand new platform. A lot of the changes made to the ultra-long-range version are just the addition of some tanks in the hold and some certification changes. So you can always downgrade it, which enhances the resaleability, because you can just go on and sell it as a regular A350-1000 if you decommission all the ultra-long-range equipment.
Right.
So that's got to be quite compelling in terms of value further down the line. So I'd be very surprised. I think there's two things. Qantas will either take the A350 or these test flights will say nobody wants to sit in the plane for 21 hours and they'll abandon it. But I think they're going to do it because that's always been a dream of Qantas.
Totally.
The Sydney-London thing, right?
Yeah, it always has been, and it's never gone away. And of course, Qantas are well set up for Airbus operations. They've got the A330s and the A380s there, so no problem there. Thinking about Australia and the state of Virgin Australia, you've often been critical of the way that airline's been. Well, it was altered, wasn't it, from a low-cost, sort of plucky low-cost carrier disruptor in the marketplace when it launched, to becoming almost a sort of in lockstep with the competitor Qantas, the one that you can't beat in the end, actually. And they've just announced that they're going to lay off, I think, in the hundreds of people, and also their losses, depending on what you believe, anywhere between about the high 200s to the low 300 millions. It sounds like they might be finished, are they?
Yeah. So it's 750 management staff as well, right? So these are all people from head office that are going to go. And as you pointed out, they changed from being a plucky, low-cost Australian upstart to lockstepping with Qantas. And let's be clear, they were successful when they were the plucky, low-cost upstart, right? They actually did quite well. But then you had that guy Borgetti. He came in after having lost out on getting the Qantas top job. And it looks as though his sole mission was to was to turn it into Qantas and compete with Qantas and try and smash Qantas, which was never, ever going to happen in Australia. Never, ever. Yes.
So why? I mean, how can you get away with, because you're going to have to convince boards and other management, and people have got to be on board. It's all going to make sense. Why would they have bought that? Well,
it's a strategy. Right? Maybe nobody had a better strategy. They had this plan to involve all these other airlines through cross-holdings and ownership deals, because they thought they were going to get a lot of feed-in traffic. And they may be getting a lot of feed-in traffic, but not to places like, Harvey Bay, Alice Springs, which it was so predictable that Qantas would announce the flight. In fact, I wonder whether Qantas wouldn't announce flights to pointless destinations just to make Virgin do it, because that's pretty much what would happen. Qantas would say, we're going to put in a 737 into Mackay. Bang, 2 weeks later, Virgin would announce 737 to Mackay. You're like, wow, okay.
Yeah.
And then I don't think Virgin, so Virgin exited the low-cost market, and Qantas then promptly filled it with Jetstar. So, they couldn't even go back easily. I was speaking to an accountant friend of mine in Melbourne the other day, and he's obviously also quite interested in airlines and all that type of thing. Who wouldn't be, right? And he said he wouldn't be surprised, tongue-in-cheek, that Borgetti wasn't a plant by Qantas.
Oh,
bringing Virgin down.
Yeah, they're like a pathogen put into the system to destroy it from within.
Destroy it from within.
But
I mean, even their international arm, they bought these 777s, and I remember I was actually in Australia when the first one arrived, and you could see the tail that it arrived into Melbourne, and it was all, blah, blah, look, we've got 777s, we're going to go places. Well, they go to Los Angeles, and that's basically it.
Yeah.
And you wonder, well, where's the imagination? Why wouldn't they be flying to Mumbai or somewhere, or Johannesburg? Places that there's not a huge amount of competition, because getting to South Africa from Australia, it's either Qantas. If you want to go direct, it's either Qantas or it's SAA from Perth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were all these options that people were talking about. Nothing happened, mate. They flew to Los Angeles, and the A330s flew to Hong Kong and I think maybe Singapore.
Right.
That was it. Wherever Qantas flew, they flew.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's stunning that they have 750 management jobs they can just cut like that. You wonder what they were doing there in the first place. But I wonder also, we've talked about this before, is that Virgin brand, has it run its course in terms of it being edgy and all the things that made it successful early on? I mean, how long has it been around now? 40 years or more?
Yeah, it doesn't. It's not provocative. It's not. Nah.
So.
It's done its dash. But of course, it's going to be very hard for the shareholders to swallow. Somebody says, right, we're going to go back. We're going to call ourselves Aussie Blue. They're going to go back to being the plucky upstart. They're too big.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of. what it does is it mirrors how the airline system in Australia used to be in the earlier days, TAA and Ansett, in absolute lockstep. When one bought one aircraft, the other would buy exactly the same aircraft, in the same time frame. And if if TAA opened up a route, then Ansett could fly the same route, or vice versa. So it was this weird sort of lockstep duopoly, I suppose. And in the end, I think it was a political choice. Do you choose the private enterprise option, which was Reg Ansett and his airline, and Ansett and ANA, which merged, or TAA, Trans Australia Airlines? And it carried on like that for decades. And it kind of sounds like the same thing, where you've got this management of Virgin sort of in lockstep making every move that Qantas does, to the point where Qantas can make a move that it doesn't even really need to make, just so Virgin will make it and lose more money.
This has nothing to do with the airline industry, but I have a really interesting mate of mine. He's an American, and he supplies equipment for, among other things, the laundry industry, right? The commercial laundry industry. And we were talking about Australia and this and that last year. And he was just laughing at how the Australian market goes, because he sells these, I didn't even know these things existed. There are these things called continuous tunnel laundries or something. They're these big commercial laundries. It's a tunnel where it all happens. And you load the gear up on racks, and he sells a lot of them. And he was laughing about the Australian market, because he said, for example, there's a city, let's say it's Perth. He said, Perth is a city of 1 million people. You might need 3 continuous laundry tunnels in Perth. Generally, they're high capacity, they're big, they do a lot of work. And 5 or 6 laundries might rent capacity off these tunnels, but there'll be a few operators, and that's how it'll work. But he says in Australia, there'll be an old one in Perth, let's say there's 3 in Perth, then another company will come along and they'll install 3. And then all their competitors will go and install 3. And pretty soon Perth's got like 15 of these things, and it only actually needs 3. And they'll just try and smash each other for 3 years. And he's selling racks to all these companies. There you go, more racks, because they're trying to build up capacity. They're cutting price. And then after 3 years, it all just falls apart. Bang. And he says that's happened in a couple of cities in Australia, and maybe that's the business model. Maybe it's this whole, that's how we play sport. We'll get in there and we'll smash them.
Yeah, all in.
But not a great deal of imagination, or not like, hey guys, maybe they don't need any more laundry tunnels. So yeah, we could go in there and spend a lot of money, maybe make some money, but we're definitely going to lose our shirts. And it's the same thing with the housing industry. Probably also in New Zealand as well. Like you'll drive around and you'll see, 3 years ago you'll drive around bits of northern Brisbane and there's nothing there, and now suddenly there's 5 estates and they're just smashing these houses in, and you think, well, who's going to buy them? Turns out no one's buying them. But,
oh dear.
Yeah, it's right. As you say, all in.
Okay, well, and just staying on Aussie, I see it's a bit of a tenuous link, but it caught my attention. The oldest flying A320's just gone through 30 years. It's a former Ansett A320, currently operated by Royal Jordanian. I think that's the first A320 to go through 30 years of continuous service. So there you go. And it still seems like quite a new aircraft, I've got to say.
Yes, that's always... So as I use Flight Radar 24. I'm not a huge fan, but it does the job. And they were offering a deal on their various membership levels, and I think it was like $12 for a year of their so-called silver level, and that provides you a bit more information about the aircraft and some different views, like gives you a radar view, so you've got the vector and all this type of thing. But it turns out that the age of the aircraft, the information it gives you, that's actually turned out to be particularly interesting, because there are a lot of old 320s flying around. There's even some quite old A321s flying around. And to me, an A321 was only developed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So you're going to see quite a few of them coming up at their time, though I think quite a few of them will probably be retired early because the Neo is doing so well. And the A321 XLR Neo, I see big order from Air Asia X, 30 medium range XLRs and 12 long-range A330 Neos. So I think we're going to see A321 XLR in orders on a regular basis, and this is just the start.
Yes, There's still talk of Iceland Air changing their 757s over to A321 XLRs. And I was reading an article yesterday or the day before that Alaskan Airlines, which was very committed to an all-Boeing fleet, and there's always been talk that after they absorbed Virgin, right. that they were going to get rid of the A320s. They haven't done that quickly, but it looks like they're forming a new fleet of A321s, Neos, because Virgin had them on their books. And Alaska doesn't look like they want to get rid of them. So they're proudly all Boeing that they had on the nose of all their airplanes. Looks like it might be changing.
And under the current circumstances, I think you need to not be so dogged. You need to be more flexible. So that's interesting. And we have to mention the crash in the cornfield. It wasn't really a crash. It came off very well for the passengers and the crew on that Ural Airlines A321 took off from one of the airports in Moscow, hit birds basically rotating. One engine went to zero thrust, the other limited thrust. They couldn't try restarting or anything. He put it straight in the cornfield, didn't put the undercarriage down. I think that was an inspired move. And everybody basically walked away. It's incredible. And even the aircraft looks like it's still intact. Amazing.
Yeah, although it's not intact anymore because they cut it up to take it up the field.
Right, okay. But it held together in the landing. 226 passengers on board, 7 crew. And the pilot, I think he's got about 3,000 hours. The captain, 41-year-old Damir Yusupov, has been talked of as a hero, but he's saying we're not heroes. No, we're not heroes. We just did what we're trained to do. I like it when they say that.
Yeah. Follow the operator's handbook and put it down on the field.
Yeah, so that's a great high five moment. Not often that it comes off like that. And of course, we heard the news, I think yesterday, that a Kiwi couple were killed in a medevac flight in the Philippines, which is a bit sad. But anyway, anything else to talk about? Oh, SpaceX. I see the Starhopper had a successful flight, but I think it could have been. It wasn't a disaster, but it was a near disaster, wasn't it, on landing?
Apparently it was, yeah. It was a relatively hard landing, and some people are pointing to a flame which appears on the left-hand side of the jet nozzle, or the rocket nozzle, about 5-6 seconds before it landed, and the main thrust flame changed from a sort of purple-white, orangey color to a sort of yellow-orange. The whole thing did. Yeah. And I thought it was the dust, that it was burning the dust that it was kicking up as it was coming down. But some people are saying, no, there was a failure in the failure in some part, maybe a gasket went or something, and the reason the flame went orange is because the oxidizer to fuel ratio mix got horribly out of whack. Right. And if that flight had continued another 3 or 4 seconds, it wouldn't have landed at all.
It's always the way. Okay, well, they were lucky because I watched it and I just thought that was extra thrust on landing to make it touch down at a good rate. Yeah. Speaking of space, I'm going to see, because we're recording this on Tuesday the 3rd of September, I'm going to see after doing this podcast, Martin, I'm going to go and see Apollo 11 on the IMAX screen.
Oh, cool.
A 70mm film, and it looks amazing. I can't wait to see it. So next podcast, I'll report back on that. I should give you a quick report on our Brazilian trip. We went to Manaus, Brazil, between the 11th and 19th of August. We visited the airport, international airport there, where the former Air New Zealand DC-8, the last one left on the planet, ZKNZC, has been derelict since 2005. We met the people, Martin. We got to know them. We got to like them. We gave them gifts. We have great allies on the inside of the perimeter at that airport, so any pictures or any access that we need to get, even remotely, we can do through 2 very good contacts, including the boss of the airport. They like our passion. They like what we're doing. And, we made great advances just through that exercise alone, but we also got to have a look at the aircraft. It's in not bad condition. It's missing an engine. We thought it would be inside the cabin, but no. Its last flight, it was number 3 engine fire, and they had to come back to the field very heavily loaded on a hot day and landed overweight and damaged the undercarriage, and it never flew again. So the engine was taken off for inspection, and then the airline went bankrupt, and no one knows where the engine engine is. It's somewhere out there, maybe in a warehouse somewhere, in the possession of the Transport Investigation Authority, Accident Investigation Authority, something like that. But anyway, in the meantime, we've had people who've found out about the Bring Our the Bring Our Birds Home campaign, and they've made offers of DC-8 parts. We've got undercarriages, we've got an engine possibly, we've got cabin windows, we've got cockpit windows, we've got flight deck instruments. We've had a great look inside the plane, so we know what's kind of required. Got a helicopter flight over Manaus, went for an Amazon tour, Martin, pretty cool. And we'll be creating some travel packages shortly for people to go and visit the aircraft and enjoy that area as a support to our effort to save the aircraft, bring it back into New Zealand ownership and eventually bring it home. So it was a great trip, fantastic part of the world, big aviation country, Brazil. It's so big. And got some great shots at the main airport in Sao Paulo. Every airline represented there. TAM and LATAM just going all the time, and GOL Airlines. My golly, I counted 40 GOL 737s lined up. 40, just at one airport. Think about that.
Yeah. It's 200 odd million people. It's a similar population size to the States.
204 million, yeah. So we've got some great ideas to make that happen. I think we're closer to it. Nothing's sure, though, so you've got to keep on working away, but we're closer than we were. I'm turning my attention to the 737 ZK NAD now in North Carolina. I hope to go and visit that. Everything's filmed, and we're trying to get a TV show going, so that's where that one's ended up, Martin. So a good exercise and a very interesting country to visit. Great people, interesting cultures. Such a variety of people, ethnicities and and languages and just incredible.
How close is the jungle to Manaus? Is it like in the jungle?
Manaus is in the jungle.
That's literally
right on the river side of the beginning of the Amazon. I think where the Rio Negro River joins another river, and the two joining make the Amazon. And
was it hot? Continually?
Yeah, it was 36, 37 degrees, but it wasn't that humid. That's later in the year, or towards the end of the year, so we avoided that. But it was hot, and I went out running, and it was pretty hot, but quite tolerable. Yeah.
Okay. And the food?
Not bad, I got to say. Had hotel food, and I had a bit of local food. We went to a couple of meat restaurants. They love their beef and all sorts of cuts. Yeah, no problem at all. I'm stuck to the bottled water and canned drinks. But apart from that, the people are always smiling, and the traffic was crazy. I'm thinking mainly Manaus. The roads are in terrible state, but you know what? Everything flows smoother than here, I'd have to say.
Yeah, make a plan again.
It's always the way. Yeah. So anyway, I think we're out of time for this podcast. We'll get together within the next fortnight for another episode. So in the meantime, it's Paul Brennan in my little booth here in Auckland. But Martin Oakes in a little more of a historic context in Nuremberg, right?
Yeah, looking out over the centre of the medieval town, because I'm in an apartment on the 5th floor, slap bang in the middle of the old city of Nuremberg. It's actually pretty cool.
Wow. All right, good to talk again. Catch up soon.
See you later.